Have you forgiven former President KUFUOR?
Forgiven? There is nothing to forgive. In fact, you know what? You asked me this as the last question. I say to people that I never had any bitterness or any feeling of great grievance.
Yeah, enti pa Tsatsu TSIKATA and I will say okopie mu ewo GH1 TV ana one say why I'm here. Edin common. Now the conversation nyina is about a time na President KUFUOR was from 2000 to 2008. That period, I think around 2007 to 2008, you know. And papa no information ya no highway no so kire say okoje. Me person me find out as to a kwan fa so papa no ekopie mu oje. But ohwe papa no common na ase nkofo be susu se emra okoje no sa time no na yem papa president former President KUFUOR na otesu ntino people have the mentality na idea ni say ono President KUFUOR no na orchestrate sa effort no mo de Tsatsu TSIKATA ekoje. Eno ne koma yenya no highway suit. I think say ye papa Tsatsu TSIKATA kopie mu ewo GH1 television say wa am here show so no. Ena ye maame ye sister ya de nyina say wa me ye say onfanche former President KUFUOR. Na yentie ne koma nimra.
Have you forgiven former President KUFUOR?
Forgiven? There is nothing to forgive. In fact, you know what? You asked me this as the last question. I say to people that I never had any bitterness or any feeling of great grievance against President KUFUOR. He did atrocious things against me personally for whatever reason. He was determined to have me in prison, and I did go to prison, orchestrated by him on June 18th, 2008. For 5 months, by God's grace, I didn't die in prison. I was evacuated to hospital, and, you know, by God's grace, I'm still alive. Now, he tried the last day of office to offer me a pardon. I rejected it because it was in bad faith. It was clearly in bad faith. He had orchestrated everything. The day that I was being sentenced, the court had not even announced that it was going to give a decision at the end of the trial, because the trial hadn't ended. There was something in the Supreme Court which needed to come back to all that was of no account. It had been set up for me to go to jail that day. I went to jail, and you know what? I actually thank God for that experience. I say to people that going to that N0thing prison took me to another university, another faculty of law, because I engaged with many of those who were in the prison, and I realized that there were other people suffering injustices, you know, and who didn't have the kind of recourse that I had. I had the opportunity of a lawyer, a close friend of mine from my Legon days, who, you know, gave his all to stand up for my rights. A lot of those people didn't even have, I saw people who'd been in jail for 12 years. Nobody had gone to court on their behalf. So I counted myself privileged. And what is even more exciting, you know, on my first Sunday in that prison at N0thing, when I went to the church, there was a pastor from Asamankesi who came to preach. And he used as his text Genesis 50:20. That was where Joseph is saying to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
Right.
And then he also used Romans 8:18, you know. I mean, basically, whatever suffering it was meant to be for me,
it didn't turn out.
In the end, it didn't turn out like that.
All right.
In the end, you know, I mean, and my wife and I always say that we were on a spiritual high during my months in prison.
Okay. All right. We'll use a lot.
Abusha etino emunu komo no oze father chere say oh there is nothing to forgive about President KUFUOR because jail na okoye no sabi sabio wa ankowu nyame adom wa bafie e wa asodwem what you say, but it's about high time I was say emrano adwuma e ne kwan so enye se bia obi ni wa fa na you try as much as possible every effort in your capacity to make sure say wo de mra akata so momu aso no ama obi akoje eno no de emwa I think say also din komo about Supreme Court ruling.
We were on a spiritual high during my months in prison.
Okay. All right. We'll use the last 3 minutes to talk about music, since your son is a musician.
But let me add one thing.
Okay.
You talked about President KUFUOR and my imprisonment. You know, we really sometimes. I mean, I've met President KUFUOR on a few occasions since, and I mean, usually it's been in the company of my wife, and it's. You know, we've extended courtesies. I think I once ran into him. I was on a flight. I think it was South African Airlines. He was there, and as I went to my seat, I shook his hand and so on. You know, I really don't bear a grudge on account of what happened.
Okay.
But I still would hope that there are lessons learned, because I used to share with President Mills that I don't want what happened to me to happen to anybody in the NPP under him. Because President Mills, had exactly the same position. He said, look, I am not going to misuse my position to go after people that are seen as on the other side. And for me, that perspective of President Mills is something that we should all learn from. You know,
okay.
He set us a huge example of leadership. And I wish some of the people who were even his contemporaries in Legon in those days would learn from his example. I mean, he didn't try to set up a statue in his own commemoration, even though, you know, he did so much for this country.
Okay. Finally, Mr. TSIKATA.
Son.
Manifest or Sarkodie?
You know what? You are trying to trap me, but I'll give you my answer. Manifest and Sarkodie actually did a collabo, brown paper bag.
Yeah, oh, you know it.
And so, you know what? I enjoy both of them, but of course, more of the time, I'm enjoying my son than anybody else.
So you think Manifest is a better musician?
I didn't say that.
Wait, who's your favorite musician aside your son?
Don't put words.
Who's your favorite musician aside your son?
You know, I'm not going to get into that, because I can see that you are really trying very hard to set me up against Sarkodie.
No. I mean, so aside your son, who do you think is really good?
Sarkodie.
You don't know Shatawale?
You know, I'm not going to get into my likes and dislikes in music.
Thank you very much.
I was waiting for that. And former President KUFUOR, Omon Komo no, or how to Musa, where I can see phone Komo. What I say, but now our conversation, and that's why I'm here. I try as much as possible, not called enough for a music side. Cause Osha, I say, it got to a point that Sarkodie and then back manifest in a music beef. Yeah, Nanka say, why I'm here per se, or switch for that. Attention free, law, ni we na kwadeba music. But we are for that conversation in no na attention no war Supreme Court ne kwan for so a jail term by more and some no edosu ye pa. But on this one me conversation emu wa me try na me decide na odin komo about music Sarkodie and ne ba manifest and come on so bam. I'm sure do be say subscribe. Now hit it notification bell no so then they can need this akro bibia Stacy.